Before the royal titles and global headlines, Meghan Markle was just another actress in Hollywood trying to make it. Her early roles were small, blink and you miss it scenes in TV shows, background work, and eventually, a gig on Deal or No Deal holding a briefcase. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a foot in the door. The acting world is brutal, and Meghan wasn't immune to its rejection. Still, she was persistent. She knew how to present herself, how to stay in certain conversations, and how to get noticed. But in Hollywood, success doesn't always come from talent. It often comes from access. Meghan never let that go unnoticed. For someone who says she was just a hard-working actress, she sure knew how to skip a few rungs on the ladder. Behind the camera, Meghan was much more than just another actress waiting for a break. She was always networking, always placing herself in rooms where power moved quietly. People around her noticed her charm, her determination, and her talent for aligning herself with whoever was most useful. Connections mattered more than craft, and Meghan understood that early on. She didn't just want to be cast, she wanted to be chosen. Many actors hope for lucky breaks. Some engineer them. Meghan seemed to know which handshake led to which opportunity, and she played that game with precision. Ambition isn't a flaw unless you start stepping on people to climb. And Meghan always seemed to be wearing heels. Those high society parties weren't always what they appeared to be. Branded as networking events or charity galas, many of them were really exclusive yacht gatherings where powerful men mingled with young women looking for a chance. Held off the coast of Italy, France, or even in LA's private marina circles, these parties were where introductions happened, not just to roles, but to lifestyles. The guest lists were tight and the stakes were high. These weren't open bars and Instagram moments. They were deals behind closed doors, whispered promises, and favors exchanged in silence. Being invited meant you were seen as useful. Meghan made her way into those circles, and stayed. There's a reason these parties are so secretive. The line between influence and exploitation was thin, and sometimes vanished entirely. You had billionaires, producers, agents, and women barely out of college dressed up like they belonged. Everyone had a role. Some came to party, others came to hunt, and some, well, they came to be hunted. Stories from insiders. Describe a scene where appearances were polished, but the undercurrent was dark. To some, it was a shortcut. To others, a trap. And those who navigated it well, like Meghan, walked out with new connections, new deals, and a carefully curated image. She played the long game, and she played it well. Just don't mistake silence for innocence. More than a few people have spoken off the record about who they saw at these events. Names float in and out, whispered during late-night conversations or dropped carefully in memoirs and tell-alls. Meghan's name shows up more often than people expect. Not in the middle of scandal, but never too far from it either. The circles she moved in weren't for beginners. Everyone knew who had power, and everyone knew who wanted it. Whether she was sipping wine on the upper deck or chatting with a certain billionaire on the dock, Meghan understood the value of being seen, and the importance of not being too visible at the wrong time. She always seemed to know just when to smile and when to disappear. And then there's Epstein, the puppet master in the shadows of high society. He built a twisted empire using wealth and charm to pull people into his web. The same yacht culture that elevated actresses and influencers also shielded predators like him. He made these parties seem elite, luxurious, and exclusive, when in truth, they were often transactional at best and sinister at worst. His guest lists included politicians, royalty, celebrities, and rising stars. Not everyone who attended knew what he was, but those who did often looked the other way. Epstein thrived in environments where silence was currency. And Meghan? She knew how to stay silent when it served her. No one's saying crimes were committed, but in circles where wealth and secrecy rule, you don't always need to do something illegal to end up in complicated company. Some people climb the ladder by hard work. Others just know where the ladder is and who's standing near it. Connections matter. Proximity matters. In some industries, just being in the room tells a whole story. From very early on, there was a sense that everything was part of a bigger plan. Meghan didn't float through Hollywood cluelessly. She moved with purpose. She had a talent for reading the room, knowing who had power, who could open doors, and who to smile at just long enough. There's nothing wrong with ambition. But when ambition is mixed with charm and perfect timing, it doesn't always feel accidental. Over time, small bits of her past began quietly disappearing. Photos vanished. Stories that once circled online got pulled or updated. There were murmurs about phone calls made and emails sent. Behind-the-scenes nudges to remove, revise, or reframe. And when journalists feel like they're being told what they can and can't say, the whispers get louder. It's less about guilt and more about control. Why erase something that was supposedly harmless? Some reporters eventually started talking. Not in loud interviews, but in tweets, off-the-record quotes, and background comments. One even said their story got shut down after a deal was made for exclusive access elsewhere. It's the kind of media trade-off that happens more often than people think. But when the subject of those trade-offs is someone who speaks often about truth and integrity, people notice the gap between the branding and the behind-the-scenes moves. Those gaps were noticed behind palace doors too. Internally, there were quiet concerns. Publicly, everything seemed polished. Privately, insiders reportedly felt misled. One source claimed there was real panic, especially after being told everything in the past had been vetted and was clean. Maybe it was. Or maybe there were things that just didn't make it into the final narrative. Either way, there were clear signs of discomfort from people who don't usually flinch. When the Netflix series dropped, it was supposed to be a crowning moment, but it didn't land the way it was meant to. Critics called it tone deaf. The public found it boring, forced, even manipulative. And suddenly, the once carefully built image started to feel a little too produced. People began to pull back, not because they hated her, but because they no longer bought the story. Meanwhile, the people who once sang her praises began to go quiet. No more tagged photos, no glowing interviews. Some even started leaking texts and DMs. Not to ruin her, but maybe to protect themselves. That's often how it starts. Silence isn't just absence, it's a signal. In certain circles, when people begin stepping back, it usually means they don't want to be next in line for questions. Screenshots, call logs, and old photos started popping back up. Not on the front page, but on forums, message boards, private threads. People weren't screaming about her, they were connecting dots. Her name showed up here and there, not as the headline, not as the villain, just in the room. And in stories like this, being in the room is sometimes the most important detail. There's the version of her we see in glossy interviews. Then, there's the version that's being pieced together by people who've interacted with her off camera. When those two versions stop matching, trust becomes fragile. It's not just about what happened, it's about what was sold. And the more people feel sold to, the more they start asking what they didn't get told. A lot of the frustration isn't even about her history. It's about how hard she's worked to make sure certain parts of that history stay buried. People don't like to feel tricked. When someone builds a brand on authenticity but dodges tough questions, it doesn't feel brave, it feels calculated, especially when the dodging becomes the whole strategy. The longer she stays silent, the more curious people get. And in today's world, silence isn't protection. It's an invitation for others to take the mic. She could clear the air, she could own her story, but for now, the strategy seems to be ignore, deflect, wait it out. That only works when people stop caring, and right now, more people are tuning in.